I blew out my shoulder my last game of my freshman year of college, and that was it. I was lost. I probably spent a year to 2 years just trying to figure out, what am I going to do with my life?
Ryan Schachtner is a former collegiate baseball player and major league prospect who had his career ended by a shoulder injury.
You put all your eggs in that basket, and that all of a sudden becomes your identity.
With no plan B, he pivoted into financial services and spent the next 20 years building Carolina Asset Management, one of the fastest-growing financial planning firms in the Southeast.
We built out a tool that can measure the 20 key performance behaviors, communication style, and learning style. So the last 4.5 years, we've worked with NFL Combine guys, and 32% of our guys get drafted a round higher than they were projected at.
What were you doing differently that made athletes trust you with their money?
I got introduced to a number of current and former pro athletes that...
Ryan Schachtner is a former collegiate baseball player and major league prospect who had his career ended by a shoulder injury. With no plan B, he pivoted into financial services and spent the next 20 years building Carolina Asset Management, one of the fastest-growing financial planning firms in the Southeast. But what he's done since is what makes him a business MVP. Today, he's known as the Athlete Financial Whisperer. He's the author of Foundation for Financial Excellence, an international bestseller. He's been named one of Entrepreneur Magazine's top 10 finance entrepreneurs to watch, and he's building the financial literacy infrastructure for student athletes nationwide through a must-win and Success Beyond Game Day. Ryan Schachtner, welcome to Business MVP.
Hey, Sammy, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to dive in.
I am too. Thank you so much. So I want to start off. I read that you ended up at an Atlanta Braves collegiate tryout at age 13. How does that happen? What happened? Tell us about that.
Yeah, it was a complete accident. So I was a catcher, and
Okay.
I was practicing on a field that was right next to the field that they were doing the tryout camp. I had no idea they were doing it. It was just, young, and we're bored, and it's the summer, so let's go play baseball. And so they were short on catchers to catch all the pitching prospects. And so one of the scouts walked over and asked if I could help out, and I had no idea what was going on, and
Right.
ended up doing pretty well in it, and that kind of put me on the map. So yeah, it was just a happy accident.
That's wild, actually. That's really wild. So you were on a path to the pros, and then a shoulder injury ended everything, it seems like, right? You were just finishing freshman year of college. So tell us about that, and then how did you mentally get through that moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think like most athletes, when you're performing, right, when you're in your sport, even though you're in college, right, you're so focused on your sport and excelling at it that you block everything else out. And so, I blew out my shoulder my last game of my freshman year of college, and that was it. Reconstructive surgery and all that fun stuff. And it was hard, right? Because we're so bought into, especially when I think when in baseball or some of the more revenue producing sports, you get labeled, right? Like you're a prospect, you've got a shot at going to the next level. You put all your eggs in that basket, and that
Right.
all of a sudden becomes your identity. And so when it happened, I had done just that. I had put all my eggs in the basket of, I'm going to be a professional baseball player. And
Yeah.
for me, that meant not focusing as much as I should on school and,
Right.
all the really important stuff. So when it happened, I mean, I was lost. I probably spent a year to 2 years just trying to figure out, like, what am I going to do with my life? Because
That's tough.
going through school, you're defined by your GPA, and that wasn't something that I wanted to broadcast. And so, yeah, it took me to a while to figure out, all right, how am I going to do life moving forward?
Yeah, that makes sense. But I'm sure that also prepared you for the next chapter, being so mentally tough after that. So that's pretty wild. As you said, you were 100% focused on baseball growing up. And so what did that intensity and discipline build in you that translated directly into business later on?
Yeah, I think when you're going through it as athletes, I mean, especially a lot of the work that we do now, it's validation of the fact that we do so much to prepare for life after sports. But it's connecting the dots that what you did in the past through sports actually applies to life after sports. And so, it's the extra practice that you put in. Baseball is a sport where if you get a hit 3 out of 10 times, you go to the Hall of Fame. And so it's a
Right. Yeah.
sport. It's really a sport built on failure, right? And so you get
Hmm.
really, really accustomed to failing the majority of the
Interesting.
time, and learning how to then adapt from failure and keep on pressing on, and showing up when you don't feel good, and it's
Hmm.
all the things that, regardless of sport, right, regardless of gender, sport level you play at, you've built through your athletic career. And so I think the main ones that resonated with me was just practice, right? And so when I got into the financial services space, which quite frankly was the only place that would take me at that time, because again, bad resume. I started working on a commission only basis, so they didn't have to pay me anything, right? I mean, that's like the ideal situation. You get someone to work basically for free, and if they don't produce, then you're not out any money. So, but it was having to learn the skill sets, and knowing that as I made phone calls and I reached out to people, I was going to fail more than I was going to be successful. So there's a lesson right there with baseball. The practice aspect where you have to refine your swing or your throwing, or the over and over the repetition of it, which was the practice of, all right, I've got to learn how to talk to people, how to learn about them and do it in a way that doesn't come across like I'm just trying to sell products. And so it
Hmm.
was just the practice and the blue collar kind of nature of doing the hard work and embracing it, and combined with adapting quickly when you're failing. And I was fortunate enough to turn it into a long career.
I love that. So, speaking of failure, what was your biggest failure as an athlete?
Well, to me, that's a great question. I think not making it, right? Even though it was the injury and it
Right.
was
Not your
beyond
fault
my
necessarily.
control.
Right. Right.
Yeah, it was not living up to, my potential.
Hmm.
Or what was the perceived potential that I
Hmm.
had. So I think, to me, if you had asked me that, to me that's still the biggest failure. And listen,
Hmm.
it's always going to haunt you, right? Those big
Yeah.
losses, or the things that you don't accomplish that you wish you had a second chance at, it's always going to haunt you. Just like a lot of the pro
Hmm.
guys that we work with talk about. I mean, heck, Brady talks about the games, the Super Bowls that he lost,
Right.
and
Of
those
course.
still haunt him. And so, especially the Giants helmet catch one. And so, that's always it's always gonna live with you. So I think that's probably, what could
Yours.
I have done had I not gotten injured? So I think that would be the biggest failure.
Yeah. So, how did that help you handle failure in business then, you think? Just having had that experience so you knew how to like kind of fail your way forward, or, how did that translate for you in business?
You wake up the next day, right? The sun's going to come up tomorrow, and that whatever happens, as big or as detrimental as it seems at the time, it's not going to ruin you, and you're going to get another shot at something. It may not be what you want or what you thought it was going to be, but you're going to get another shot at something. And it's not the end of the world. And so pick yourself up, get yourself together, figure it out, and press on. I mean, I don't know. That's probably the
Yeah.
best I got right now.
No, but it sounds so simplistic, but I don't think a lot of people can really do that, right? They fall into depression, they become unproductive, all sorts of things can happen, right? So, as simplistic as it sounds, you have a solid outlook on that, right? So I think that's important for people to take away.
Well, and that comes with time, right? Perspective comes with time. If you asked me in the moment, it was the worst thing. Well, I didn't know what I was going to do. I mean, it probably took me a year and a half to 2 years to, figure out that the sun was going to come up the next day. And so the sooner you can get through that cycle, and I think there's probably more resources for that now. There's more people
Mhm.
talking about it now.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah, like having
but
the
yeah,
plan B or having other interests. Yeah,
exactly.
I think so. I mean, I obviously talked to a lot of people on this podcast, and a lot of athletes are heavy promoters of the what's next concept, right? Like even while you're an athlete, just because even if you're super successful, that career could be over at 30, it could be over at 20, right? It could be over at 35 if you're lucky. But then you have this whole lifetime, right, of what's next. So I feel like that's a really big theme out there right now for athletes, whether it's managing their money or getting involved in the community or whatever it is for what's next, a whole nother second act career, that's being talked about quite a bit now. But I think it's because there was this whole generation, that you were part of that you put all your eggs in this basket for the dream, which makes total sense to me. But then when something can turn on a dime and then what, right? So totally makes sense.
They have permission now, right? Because of NIL and all that sort of thing. Whereas if I were to build relationships with alumni and boosters and all that kind of thing, it would have been taken as an impermissible benefit, even if I didn't get anything, right? Even if it was just a relationship and we went out for coffee, had they paid for the coffee, then that's a violation, right?
Well, and that's one of the silver linings, I think, of the NIL situation, right? Is that kids are thinking bigger earlier and smarter.
Yeah.
And I think we'll talk about that more too. But yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. So you took an internship in financial services. You used relationships from your baseball career to get an opportunity. You mentioned it was commission-based. So walk me through how you went from that, from there into one of the fastest growing firms in the Southeast.
Being 13, being exposed to the major league camp, and then, having the scouts call and follow you for a number of years, like you learn how to think bigger, right? Something that maybe I didn't think was possible prior to that day of all that happening was now a possibility. And so you get to dream a little bit. And so, you do the internship and you start to think, all right, well, what could this become? But then it's also, what do the individuals that I'm working with need? And I was fortunate. I think, my life is a series of happy accidents, right? I mean, I got introduced to a number of current and former pro athletes that they had either made bad decisions or somebody had taken advantage of them. And so they came on as clients. So it was a rebuild, right? And so for me as a rebuild, I didn't want to be the second person that they could say, hey, this guy, messed me over as well. And so to me, it just made me reimagine what financial services, especially for athletes, should look like and examine, hey, they're in a very unique set of circumstances. They have a unique career timeline, but the same concepts still apply. Well, the concept is, hey, at some point I'm going to be done in my peak earnings, and whatever I've saved has to be able to provide an income for me. Well, when you condense your saving period to, an average of 3 to 4 years, then that doesn't lend itself to traditional investments, right? Like you can't buy and hold in the stock market for 3 years and all of a sudden have enough to supply an income. And so it just got me thinking, all right, well, their situations are completely unique. But the concept of savings, the concept of putting the money away is still the same. And so I went from the internship to thinking, all right, well, if we're really going to service all these athletes, it's got to be in a way that aligns with what their lifestyles look like. And so it started really with that. And then it started with, all right, well, if they messed up once, right? Let's deal with the foundation, really for everybody. But what is the foundation of how they view money, right? What are the attitudes, behaviors, and beliefs that they grew up with that are either true or not true about money and all that? And then let's deal with that before we then start to say, hey, put your money here or there and all that. And so it was really a psychological kind of experiment at first that turned into the foundation for how we worked with all our clients, but specifically our athletes. So let's deal with that, and then let's
I love that, like the relationship with money.
With our
I love that. That's really interesting. So you service obviously a lot of athletes, but you also service other non-athletes then, correct?
Yeah, entrepreneurs, executives. Yeah, exactly.
Got it. Cool. So professional athletes have started calling you the athlete financial whisperer, I read. So how did that happen? How'd you get the nickname? And what were you doing differently that made athletes trust you with their money?
everybody's going after athletes, right? So it just was a funny name that stuck. Pre-COVID, they had all told me, hey, you need to write a book about this, because I was having a lot of success with rebuilding where they had the opportunities, right? They had now a shorter time frame to earn the money, and we had to make up for lost time, which is really, really difficult. And so it started with the psychology of it. Let's deal with the attitudes, behaviors, beliefs. Let's put them in a position to where they're educated enough to be able to identify if something fits with what their goals are, or if it doesn't, so that they can then be the one in control. And they're not relying on me to say, hey, put your money here, put your money there. They have now a filter of, this is what I'm trying to accomplish. Somebody's coming at me with an idea or a business opportunity, real estate or an investment, whatever it may be. This either aligns with my goals or it doesn't align with my goals. And I can filter that out really, really quick before I go down the, buying into the hype and all that kind of stuff. And so it was really, let's set them up as really the GM, for lack of a better word, of their financial life.
Yeah.
Where they can pick the right players, the right products and all that make that up. And they can hire, they can fire, they can do all of that type of stuff. So it was really that concept, one that they're familiar with. And that's just the approach that we took. And so that took off really well. They were, more and more, athletes were coming on board. So that's pre-COVID. That's what they were telling me. They told me, hey, you need to write this book. But I was building a firm and, I didn't have time. And so COVID kind of introduced that opportunity.
That's cool. But I think what you're saying really is like you're empowering these athletes to understand money, understand their relationship with money. And then, you're helping them and guiding them along, but you're really empowering them is like kind of what you're describing to me. So, I mean, that translates over to business perfectly because, as a good leader, you want to empower the people around you, right? You don't want to be the bottleneck. So, I mean, that model makes total sense to me. I've never thought of it that way when it comes to athletes, but that's really interesting. It's awesome.
I think a lot of times athletes, they sell themselves short on the knowledge aspect. And you may not have a master's or a doctorate, right? But you've got enough life experience to where you're smarter than you think.
I understand that totally. Yeah. Like they think that, I'm just an athlete, right? Because this is all I've been focused on, but they're not giving themselves credit for if you hadn't been focused on athletics, you probably would have done other things, right? Or been smart in other areas. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. It's like the dumb jock stereotype, I guess, more or less. But
yep.
Yeah. So what's the hardest business decision you've had to make? And then how do you think your athletic background shaped how you handled it?
I wrote the book. The book did really well. It launched right when NIL went live. And so that kind of got me thrust into that world and those conversations. But I recognized that there was a really big gap on the development of athletes. And it was for probably, numerous reasons. But the one that I recognized and hit home the most was they're putting off development of themselves because they're focused on their performance now in the moment. So I'm going to put off what's, a couple years down the road because I'm so focused on developing, my performance and getting better and maybe making it to the next level. And so for me, it was, all right, well, if I could find a way to bridge the gap and help them do both at the same time, with data and all that kind of stuff, then we could really do something unique. So it was taking a little bit of a hiatus from, finance to investigate that and develop some tools and then test it out. And then really the pivot of, hey, as much fun as I've had on the finance side, I think there's a bigger impact that could be had on development of the people, right? And so it was making that decision. And I think, you asked athletics, how did that prepare me? I think you do that all the time in athletics, right? Like I was a catcher, is really, from 13 on, but prior to at age 12, I was playing shortstop and second base and And so as your skill set gets refined, as the needs of the team or the needs of the market shift, you reinvent yourself, you adapt yourself to something where you're going to be able to help out more. And so for me in baseball, it was I could help the team more as a catcher than I could as a shortstop and second baseman. And so it was, I think I've lived it before, and so it wasn't really anything new. But again, that's going back to the correlation of athletes have been through all of these things before. We just didn't recognize it as it was happening. So when it happens to us in life after sports, it's not anything new. We've done it successfully. It's just recognizing what's happening so that you can have the awareness and you can take advantage of the situation.
Yeah, and I would imagine with the NIL being a thing now, that must have been a huge opportunity for you, right? Because as you said, like pivoting and adapting, but being able to advise these athletes like right from the get-go on how they, how they're going to invest their money, what they're going to do, right? So that must have been a huge opportunity for you all, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, it was the stuff that didn't even talk about investing the money. Because you have to think back in the first few, the first year and a half, maybe 2 years of NIL, there was no revenue share. There was like the boosters hadn't really gotten a hold of NIL at that point, right? So it was more legitimate, like, hey, this business or this brand wants to do a deal with this person. And so the numbers weren't as big. So it wasn't the fun, sexy stuff of, hey, put your money here and it's going to grow like this. And it wasn't that. It was, hey, there's this thing called taxes and you're going to pay it not in the state of your residence. It's going to be in the state that it's earned at. And so even though you live in Florida, if your deal is done and you do the deal and you go out and film and do whatever in California, guess what? You're paying California's income tax. Yes. And so it was that sort of stuff that I think a lot of times, even now, when we see some agents and that try to get these pro athletes that we work with, they avoid those conversations, the reality of the money. And so it was a good opportunity to have those real talks about the money to, help the athletes kind of navigate those early days.
You said that 95% of Fortune 500 CEOs played sports, and I think it was 94% of C-suite women are former athletes. Why do you think that is, and what are athletes not doing enough of to leverage that advantage?
It's the ability to deal with failure and to be able to pivot rapidly, right? Because if you think any entrepreneur, any CEO, any high-level executive, nothing's going to go according to plan. And so your ability to understand what's happening, process it, and then adapt and make the right calls, it's all about responding to failure. And that's every athlete, right? If you're playing soccer, you don't know, if the pass is going to make it to you, if someone's going to try and steal. It's all about adapting. Football, you don't know if you're the quarterback, if it's going to get intercepted, if they're going to blitz from your blind side. You don't know any of that. And so it's all about how can I do what I can with the information presented to me. Then I live the situation, adapt and adjust and make the best of it. And so to me, that's all, running a business, owning a business. That's all it is. And so I think athletes are just naturally, aligned to that by the virtue of athletics. And I think, to connect the dots quicker, NIL provides the best bridge because now you can build relationships with alumni and have those relationships, whereas you couldn't before. You can do a deal with a company, if I were an athlete in today's, I'd probably do, part of my deal would be I get to meet with the CEO or the heads of the departments once a month while we're working together. And you can pay me half what you were going to pay me because I'm going to build relationships. They're going to be able to open up doors that even just athletics. after I'm done wouldn't be able to open for me. And so let me use my platform, right? Like that's part of your platform is people want access to athletes, I think in large part because they want to live, they want the inside info, they want to feel like they're still part of the locker room, all that sort of stuff. And so use that, leverage that to create those relationships that you can then leverage when you need them.
Yeah, so it's definitely leveraging the platform and the relationships, but I think it's also leveraging the mindset, right? Like even just going into an interview and being like, I can adapt, I know what it feels like to fail and keep going. I mean, those are just massive assets in the corporate world, as we know, right? Like a lot of people, like you said, they can't do that. So I think there's just so much there that athletes need to realize and then, leverage. So, but I mean, I think even people that are not athletes, they can do the same thing. You just have to be able to talk to those experiences.
To your example, just in the interview process, I mean, a lot of the work, so the last 4.5 years, we've worked with NFL Combine guys, and we've got a great, like 32% of our guys get drafted a round higher than they were projected at. And so why is that, right? Well, the majority of the draft process is the interview, right? You're building relationships, you're articulating your value proposition. So how do you do that different than everybody else? And so if I'm an athlete saying, well, I've got leadership skills and all that, well, that's great, but that's not unique to athletics. But if you can go in and say, listen, if things aren't going according to plan, I can adjust really quickly while maintaining high quality performance. I can manage work stress very, very well. So if things aren't going right in the work scenario, or I can compartmentalize that and I'm going to show up like you need me to show up. And so it's being able to cite specific behaviors that they have strengths in, that then sets them apart. And you can have deeper conversations and you can leverage athletics as the example of, well, they say, well, tell me an example of when you manage stress in the workplace really well. Well, I was in game 5 of whatever, and the referee was making really, really bad calls. And I blocked that out and I was able to perform really well. So adversity was hitting from, an authority figure, and I stayed the track. We executed the game plan and won. And so it's being able to give those precise, in the interview process, examples that you've experienced countless times as athletes.
Just to kind of finish the NIL conversation, obviously NIL has completely changed college athletics. What are, in your opinion, what are schools and athletes getting right about it? And what are they getting dangerously wrong?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest question is the legislation piece of it now. And, I think this is probably a whole nother podcast, but
we can do
the
it.
two things that they got wrong initially was the boosters, got involved in it. And so that's, I think, what drove prices up so high, is that you could have a guy that owns a company that wants to see his team win right now reach out to an athlete on Instagram and, say, I'm going to give you $1 million, even though your skill set doesn't justify $1 million, but I'm going to pay that just to get you so we can win a couple more games. And so you had these third-party influences that were dictating the market, right? So you had that piece, and then you had the tampering piece, which kind of goes hand in hand. I mean, what a lot of people don't understand is there's athletes, playing in season that are getting messages from people that are shopping them around to other coaches that don't actually represent them. And so they're acting in an agent capacity, but the athlete doesn't know who they are. And so now you have that disruption. I think if you solve those two things, you solve the majority of the issues with NIL. But, I think the revenue share, listen, there was a lot of money that has been made off the backs of athletes that had they shared that a little bit, and it didn't have to be much. It could have been a $1,500 a month stipend, for athletes so that they could eat and they could do stuff. I think we wouldn't be here where we are with college athletics. And so, I think when you correct something that's been one way for so long, sometimes the transition, that's where you get a lot of the negative negative aspects that get introduced.
Yeah. So, if you could go back and tell your younger self one thing about what building a business actually requires, what would it be?
Showing up, whether you feel good about it or not. It's just the constant showing up and then outlasting everyone else. I mean, I think one of the reasons I was so successful in finance is I just outlasted people. I just didn't quit. And and that was huge, right? I mean, it ended up being, for the first couple of years were slow, and then all of a sudden it was just an explosion because I was still there. People would reach out. We talked to you a year ago or 2 years ago. We're ready now, and it's just this. Just keep showing up, keep putting in the work, and it'll eventually. It may not look like you thought it would look, but it'll eventually work.
Yeah, and I think that's really good advice, especially for the younger generation out there, so used to having the flexibility and remote work and all of that. Like, people have forgotten that, just being consistent and showing up is better than anything you can probably do, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's important for people to hear is, just keep doing the work, keep showing up, heads down, all of that, right? So, because I think now we've gotten so spoiled on, the flexibility and kind of running our own schedules that that's sort of gotten lost. So I think that
Yeah.
is definitely a good reminder. And then what habit or principle from your athletic career do you think every entrepreneur, athlete or not, should adopt immediately?
Being able to accept and pivot from failure. I think that, I mean, it's kind of the theme of what we've talked about today, but I think not everything is going to go according to plan. In fact, nothing's going to go according to plan. And so, being able to adapt and accept that fact, and then adapt and move forward. I mean, that people would solve a lot of problems if they just did that.
Yeah. Did somebody give you that advice, or is that just, I mean, obviously you learned that from the shoulder injury, but, is there a piece of advice that you've been given that you still follow, or is it just kind of from your experience?
I've probably picked up a lot of it along the way, but if you can't, usually, if you can't see it in your own life, patterns in your own life where you've either done it or not done it and things worked out well or didn't work out well, then it never resonates, right? So I probably heard that at some point when I was really young, but then you have the benefit of perspective and life experience and seeing that, it's true. And so then that becomes kind of a principle or motto that you live by.
You're working with athletic departments in some of the largest conferences in the country and building high school financial curricula, I think with 2 states currently. Maybe it's more now. So tell us about that. And then what drives you to keep doing this type of work?
Yeah, I mean, I think impact is the short answer, right?
Yeah.
Being able to have a positive impact for athletes. I mean, as goal for success beyond game day, it's to impact 1 billion athletes, and when we get there, it's going to be 2 billion, right? So it's that's the kind of the driving goal. But whether it's financial literacy, whether it's helping them perform or understand. I mean, we measure now. We built out a tool that can measure the 20 key performance behaviors, their communication style and learning style, and with 92% accuracy and from 0 to 100. So very, very precise scoring of this. And so if you think about, all right, how can we help people win? And it's teams helping coaches win because they can measure recruits coming in to make sure they actually align with the program. Because you have transfer portal, speed of recruiting is like weeks now versus years. And so being able to see, all right, this guy's really big, fast, and strong, but do they align with what we're building here so that we can actually build a winner and a consistent winner? So helping with that, being able to identify, again, those behaviors, what's strong, what's weak, and then being able to put together development plans or programs that can help the athletes perform on the field, but then take those learnings off the field when they're done with their careers. And so, we've been really blessed being able to work for the last 4.5 years with a lot of NFL athletes and getting tons of great feedback from them. But helping in the basketball worlds now, volleyball, soccer, football, you name it, being able to help at a younger age, really drive the self-awareness that these athletes have, and then develop from there to avoid the learning curve of, for me, it was 2 or 3 years, but some athletes, it's 5 to 10 years, like when they're done playing. So if we can drive that at a younger age, then we're just developing better humans, and they're able to use that life experience in sports, but then, quicker transitions after. So that's what I do, I guess, as a hobby for fun is that sort of stuff. But
I love that. So impact, legacy, all those things that we talk about on here. So that's great. So what are you working on right now that you're the most excited about? Like what's new? What's coming?
We've got entry into college basketball at really, really high levels. So some of the top programs in the country. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's the challenging of, what are they really looking for, and how do we
Mm-hmm.
use our tools to deliver on that? And so whether it's from recruiting, whether it's starting to measure things like leadership potential, grit, heart, like those sorts of things that we talk about in athletics, but now being able to put a precise number to it and being a part of some of those championship runs, hopefully, that's just the challenges, and seeing how the market adapts, and how the landscape of coaching and players, how that has adapted and changes, and keeping up and being a consistent solution with that. We've got
Mm-hmm.
that going on, and then we've got the 2027 Indigenous Games and Gatherings in Canada. So think Native American Olympics globally. So we're
Cool.
doing leadership development, coaching development, player development for 6,000 to 7,000 athletes next summer in Canada. So
How neat.
that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'll have to check that out. I haven't heard of that. That's really neat. Every sport different and then kind of more granular. Is every team different based on like what they're trying to accomplish and their goals and who's the leader? Or is it you can just kind of apply these programs and platforms and applications that you discussed, sport wide? Or is it that you're really having to like, you have a bigger framework, right? But then you're kind of crafting it individually for the client like you would in the business world?
Very much the latter. So
Yeah.
similar but different, right? Because a coach
Hmm.
is going to run a different scheme. He's going to require different players. And so
Right.
does that
So just how you
player
do in
not
business
just
with a
have,
client. Yeah.
yeah, do they not just have the physical talent to play at that position at that level in that
Hmm.
system? But what is
Right.
their mental behavioral talent? And does that align with that position in that system at that level? And so it's being
Interesting.
able to take the tools and then adapt them to the specific coach, the system they run, the level of performance, and all of that.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's really interesting. And you base most of that on what, like psychological assessments and data-driven results,
Yeah.
or?
Yeah, all data driven. And so we built out our own assessment that it takes like 10 minutes to do. You rank two sets of 18 questions from most
Mhm.
favorable to least favorable. And then that gets
Hmm.
us again, 92% accurate. It's really the study of values and how and what you value, how that can dictate behavior, right? So that gets us the 20 key performance behaviors, and then the communication and learning styles. And then we start to measure things like grit and leadership and growth mindset, because those are, if you say, hey, what is grit? Well, it's a combination of different behaviors. And so it's various combinations. So how do we come up with that formula based on how that coach would define it? And so, yeah, it's really data driven through that. And then it's building out tools that can help them identify, hey, this person aligns with, my program. I can find out right now if they do. And then how do we keep and measure focus and mindset throughout the season? And so it's different
How do you
tools that,
motivate them? Uh-huh.
yeah, it's how do we help people win, right? And so that winning could mean as a coach getting the right players and winning. It could be as a player reaching your potential, right? Because most of the separators, when you look at high level, really athletics in general, but the higher you go in athletics, talent there's not a whole lot of difference between,
Right,
you
because 'cause they're
know,
also great. Yeah,
yeah. I mean,
understood.
like a 4.4 40 is pretty close to a 4.2 40. Like
Right.
there's not. So who is the person you're getting, and how do you develop that person to then see success on the field? And then the same thing off the field. So once you transition, how do we help you identify what your real strengths are? How did athletics, develop those in you? How did that cultivate through athletics? And then how do you articulate that, make connections, build relationships, and then leverage what your body of work through athletics into success after sports.
Yeah. I mean, I think everything you're saying too, like people listening that are just entrepreneurs, don't have any connection to athletics, like they should be doing the same thing in their departments and with their employees, right? Like you should be, CVing them, doing assessments, figuring out how best to work with them, what motivates them. So, I mean, I think everything you're saying also apply, maybe it's a different platform, but, applies in the business world as well, So I think that's really
100%.
an important takeaway. Like you want to have the right people in the right seats, but you also want people to reach their full potential. And how do you do that, right? And it's by figuring out, their values, what drives and motivates them, all the things that you just mentioned. I mean, it translates into the business world too. So I think if people that are listening, are struggling with their teams, you need to take a hard look at, those other things, right? So.
Well, 100%. It's funny. I was in a very big, well-known ACC football program. I was watching it was somebody talking about life after sports and all of that. And everybody had notebooks and everybody was writing in the notebooks. 10% of the athletes were actually taking notes. And then the rest of them were drawing pictures and scribbling and all that sort of thing, right? And so that's really where the idea generated is, all right, well, we're doing this development, right? This is a check the box sort of thing. And so I think definitely in athletics, but very much so in corporate America, there's check the box sort of development, right? And so why do most people leave an organization, right? It's not really over finances, right? It's over, they just don't feel like they're being valued and used.
Right.
And
cultivated and grown.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so if we can identify the precise things that need to be developed, well, then it may not be 105, football roster doing the exact same thing. It may be 4 programs going on at the same time, divided up for the people that need those actual programs. So now you're developing the actual person in something that they need to be developed in. And we can show them where that falls from the data standpoint. And so now you feel as an employee or as an athlete, well, holy cow, I'm getting something that my buddy that plays at this other school isn't getting. And there's value tied to that. And so we're seeing, better retention in athletics. It would go the same to business, right? I mean, it's just a different industry, right? You could be selling clothes or you could be, playing football. It's still human behavior. It's still development. It's still all the same things, just a different industry.
Yeah. And I do a lot of leadership training and stuff. And one of the things, I mean, other than, it's always about the other person, right? But it's also being a great leader is developing the whole person, right? So kind of goes to what you're speaking about, because if you don't know what they value, what motivates them, I mean, you're right. You're not going to have any loyalty or retention in a company. That totally translates over. So Ryan, last question. What does it mean to you to be a business MVP?
Yeah, it just means showing up. I mean, I think you said it best with leadership, right? It's you're leading, even if it's just doing content on social media, you're still leading, right? It's still impacting people. And so an MVP to me is just making the most out of every opportunity, continuing to grow, become the best person you can be, and doing that inside business and in life in general. I mean, that's to me, that's what being a business MVP would mean.
I love that. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sammy. I loved it.
And that's how champions think. Here are the key takeaways from my conversation with Ryan today. Financial literacy isn't optional. It's the game that matters most. And most people are playing it without a playbook. Don't quit when it gets hard. The people who stop are usually one step from the breakthrough. And the skills that made you great at competing, discipline, preparation, resilience, are the exact same skills that make you great at business. If you got value from today's episode, share it with someone who's ready to think bigger, compete harder, and win in business. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. And if you haven't, leaving a 5-star review goes a long way in helping us grow and reach more leaders like you. You can also watch every episode on YouTube and follow along on Instagram and TikTok at Business MVP Podcast for more behind the scenes and insights. I'm Sammy Peterson. Thanks for being part of the Business MVP community. And I'll see you next time as we continue building you into an MVP in business and in life.